Let's make some cinnamon rolls. My girlfriend's birthday is coming up, and actually it's tomorrow when I'm making this video. She loves cinnamon roll, and I couldn't find a nice enough form online for me to copy, so I had to go ahead and make it myself. So I thought, if I'm already making the form by hand / myself, might as well make a tutorial so that people that are in my boat that want to learn how to make cinnamon rolls, I hope I'm saying that right. Anyways, for people that want to make these, you can follow along with me. I don't know if you can see this through the camera, but I made these just like eyeing. I pulled up a photo of Cinnamoroll. I found out how tall Cinnamoroll is. He's like 8.5 inches tall in like Canon. So I brought that into Photoshop, photoshopped a ruler next to him, and then just used that to measure out. And then I created these forms. I just kind of freehanded them. But so that you don't have to do that, you can download the forms as a PDF on my website. It'll be linked below, but it's also soso.co. If you're seeing this on TikTok, it's the same as my name on TikTok. If you're seeing this on YouTube, it'll definitely be in the description. So yeah, so forms, and this is what you'll end up with. This was the first one I made. I like the body a little more than this one, but the material you use will kind of like dictate differences you have to do. So this one was a harder material to sew, so I made all the limbs longer because it would be harder for me to like pull it inside out, which you'll see later. This one was a lot softer, so I could make the limbs a little shorter, but I didn't know how to do the eyes that well, because this is all hand embroidery for the eyes. So yeah, that is why this cinnamon roll has like janky eyes, and then this one is a lot nicer because the fabric also doesn't bleed as much as this one because I use a fabric marker to mark my lines. So I was able to mark his eyes and then have this look a lot better in my opinion, but this one's still cute as hell. So I'm pretty sure this is how big cinnamon roll is canonically, according to Hello Kitty Wiki. Yeah, so you need that. You'll need, I use a cutting board. You don't really need to. You'll need thread, preferably the same color as your fabric. You'll need, for this tutorial at least, you need blue embroidery thread and then pink embroidery thread. And fabric scissors or any fabric cutting tool. And finally, the most important part, your fabric. Oh, and a sewing machine. If you have one, it'll make it a lot easier. Here, but you'll essentially need 2 of these on a single, not on a double, on a single, so you can just cut once if you've doubled it over like me. Let's make that nicer. So you need 2 of these. 2 of these. This is the head and this is the body. You will need 2 sets of ears. So 1 and then 2. And then you will need 4 sets of the limbs. So doubled up, you'll need 2 of these, 2 of these, and another 2. So 4 of each. So let's see. Oh, and the tail I didn't put in the form because the tail will depend on the fabric you're using. So, actually, that makes it a lot easier. The fabric you're using, depending on how tough or how soft it is, this one's really soft, so I can go with a thicker tail. And all the tail is for cinnamon roll, or the way I did it, I just created a tube, like a rectangular tube, and I attached it like this. Attached it like this, and then I spun it around and then attached like 3 different points to keep it in place. So yeah, it's just a rectangular tube that you fill with. Oh, you also need polyfill. That's another really important thing that you need. So what I do when I do this project So I will draw the form. So I have this, the pleats cut out. I would say don't do that on your end. You can just cut the whole shape. Oh, also, for the people using the form that I put on my website, I have these little like marks, and that means don't sew. So like you'll sew it along this edge and you'll keep this open because you're gonna have to seal that in by hand after you fill it with polyfill. Same with the body. I have the two upper marks are going to be the places that you don't sew. So you're going to keep this open. You are going to sew the pleats though. Yeah, to create that rounded belly. If you can see here, he has like the pleat there, pleat there. But yeah, so I take my form and I will mark it with my marker. So I cut out the head. I cut it out the exact same size as my form because it's such a malleable fabric and I know it has a lot of stretch. So I'm fine with going a little smaller, but if you have a thicker fabric, like this fabric was a quilt fabric, that one I would have cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the head because I knew it would be hard to like pull through the gaps that I create, or just harder to work with as a whole. So now I'm going to cut all the other shapes out. Alright, so cut out all your pieces like this and we'll get to sewing. So first, we will actually sew the pleats. And I like to sew my pleats from the outside in. It just makes for a smoother finish, if that makes sense. Second pleat. So now we're going to do the same pleats for the other side. Alright, so now you have the pleats, right? So the pleats help because when you fill it with with the polyfill, then it creates that little pouch, right? Otherwise it's just going to be flat. So you kind of want this to get like a spherical shape. So once the pleats are there, you can start. Alright, once I have the pleats in here, I like to then sew the ears together. And I'm going to use the edge of this to the center of my foot on my sewing machine as my guide. You can clip it. That would probably make my life a little easier, but I'm lazy. So but yeah, so this is one ear down. Let me just do the next ear and I'll skip to the next part. Alright, so I've got the two ears sewed together. Now you're actually, before you do any other sewing, you're going to have to turn them inside out. Now these ones I did not, or the ears for my cinnamon rolls, I do not fill with any polyfill because I want them to kind of like be flappy ears. So yeah, so an easy way to do this would be to like push it through like this. And then you can grab like a pen and then just kind of like push it inside out, grabbing like the edges to pull through. So then eventually Yeah, see? And then you get the other side to pop out. You can take the pen out and just pull it through. I like to flap it around. So yeah, so now you have your ear all ready, right? All set. The reason I pull the ears inside out is because when you sew your head together, you're gonna, I have marks on the forms, and right here, these marks are where the ears are gonna go, but the ears are gonna go in first. This isn't pulled out yet, but they're gonna go in like that, and you're gonna sew them shut like this, so that when you turn the head inside out, the ears are gonna be right side out, if that makes sense. But yeah, so let me finish this ear, and then sew it all together. Alright, I got the 2 ears. You want them to match. Now, since I sewed them a little differently, see one ear's like significantly longer. That's okay. But when you sew it, you want to make sure that they're even when you sew it shut. So now I'm going to take my heads and mark where the ears go. Here. Ideally, you would mark it before you sew the pleats. I just did not do that. So now I'm doing that now. Okay. So now you have that. This. So I'm gonna mark on here where I want it to show up, if that makes sense. Because you're gonna sew, well, first you're gonna match the 2 pleats like that. And actually what I do is once I match the pleats, I'm gonna sew from the ear line to the other ear line first to keep it together. My pleats don't match. But that's okay. You know, you're making this by hand. If it's not perfect, it's somewhat charming, you know? Or I'd like to think so. That's how I don't cry at night. But now that I have that sewn together, the lines I made here, I'm gonna go to the edge and make sure I sew it shut so that I see that line, and that's where I'm gonna sew it shut. Like that. Thread. Now you've sewn the ear in. If you want to flip it out just to see how it looks. So it's going to be like that. And see? The ear is perfect. Now you'll do the other side. You're going to pretty much move the ears to the middle and then sew to the original line that you make, these two lines down here, you're going to sew the ear all the way down. And then stop and then go from the other side, sew all the way down to here, right? And then the reason you do that is because you're going to then pull it inside out, stuff it with the polyfill, and then sew it shut by hand at the bottom here. So now we've got this all sewn together. It's a little janky. So then that's the ears come in and you pull everything inside out. And push out all the edges. And boom. You've got the head of your cinnamon roll. Now we're going to take polyfill and fill it in, and then I'm going to hand stitch it closed. So yeah. And you're going to seal that up, hand stitch it. I'm not going to take a video of me hand stitching because honestly you probably don't want to listen to me when it comes to hand stitching. So yeah, let me just seal this up and I'll be back. Hand stitching is done, so the head is done in terms of like assembly before we put the face on. I usually put the face on after I assemble the whole thing. But yeah, so now you should have a cinnamon roll head. If you wanted to, you could just make this like double the size of everything and then just make like a squishmallow kind of thing for his head. But yeah, so now let's get to the body. Okay, so the body is kind of difficult, but I feel like it's my fault because I just don't know how plushes work too much. This is like, yeah, so basically you have to make each piece individually, or each side individually first. We're going to do the same thing as before where we do the pleats first. So you have to sew the arms like this first. If that makes sense. So you're going to sew each arm on and each leg on. Pretty much to each side. Right? You sew this together and then you're going to flip these out and take the one you used from the other side and do the same thing and then sew it like this. It's definitely not how it should be done, but it's the way I figured it out and it worked. So, I mean, it's good enough for me. Okay, so here are the two pieces with the little legs sewn on. I forgot to do the pleats on this, so I'm going to do that right now real quick. So you line up your limbs. So obviously this is not lined up correctly, but ideally they'd be the same. You'd start in the middle and then you just go along the edges. Right? And then what you do is you sew everything except the top where we marked the first two lines, and then that's what you're going to hand sew after you pull it inside out and stuff it. So I'm going to go do that. Alright, so I made a few mistakes, but your little thing, your body should look like that. And now it's time to pull it inside out and stuff it. And yeah, so that's your little body. Let's stuff it with some polyfill. So I usually stuff the legs first and then the rest of the body. I'm gonna close this up and attach it to the head, and I'll see you after. Alright, so after hand sewing the head to the body, this is what you get. He's a little wonky because I made a few mistakes this time, but yeah. Now you've got yourself a cinnamon roll. Now the only thing you need to do is put the face on, but also the tail, which is literally just a tube. So we need to cut a rectangle out. What I like to do is, let's see. Oh, is this all the fabric I have? Okay. I like to fold the fabric and use the folded edge as one of the sides. The length, or like the width, should be about the size of the gap right here. So, what is that? That's about 2 2¼ inch is how much I'll make the width of the tail. So let me go do that real quick, just sew it real quick and I'll come right back. Okay. So there you have that, and then we'll pull it through. So that is what you'll have. And the reason, and then I'll fill it with the polyfill, and then I'm just gonna sew this closed because that's what you're gonna attach. So like imagine that it's closed like that. You're gonna attach that to the butt right here and then twist it. So it's like a cinnamon roll. Alright, so time for the polyfill. So what I'm gonna do is then fold this little bit in, and I'm gonna sew it this way so that the seam is in the middle rather than sewing it on the seam. This is gonna attach here, and then we're going to circle this around like that. So yeah, so this is all gonna, once you sew this part shut, everything else is gonna be hand sewing it and then finding points of contact to the body. Like you sew it here by hand, and then once you twist it, you find all the places, like 3 points, one here, and one here, and sew that to the body so that the tail doesn't unravel. And yeah, and then I'll show you how it looks in a second. Alright, and here is how it looks. The body is done, just needs the face. This is how the tail looks on the back. So what I did was I attached it down here, the tube down there, and then I spun it around. I attached the tip of the tube to wherever it wherever it hit the spiral, and then I kept it in place, and I found one place to attach it here and one place to attach it here, solidifying it in place. So yeah, that is cinnamon roll, and now all I need to do is add his face. And I'll go do that real quick using embroidery thread. I'm not going to go over how to do the face because I still don't really get how to do it myself. So I'm just going to do the face and show you the end product right now. And here you have it, cinnamon roll. This is after I put in the face. It's a little wet because I had to get rid of the fabric, or no, the sewing marker stuff. But yeah, the eyes are a little wonky. I think the best bet would be to search up something like how to embroider an eye on YouTube, and then that'll get you like a tutorial, and then actually follow the tutorial. Don't just kind of like wing it. But yeah, so now you got cinnamon rolls. And here, let me bring, this is the one that we made together. As you can see, a little lopsided, but it's okay. This was the first one I did, also a little lopsided. Actually, in the same exact way, pretty much. This one, in my opinion, was definitely the best one. But the fabric on this one was also a lot like stiffer, so it was easier to sew. It was just harder to work with in terms of stuffing it. This one was the easiest to stuff, but also the hardest material to work with, in my opinion. And this one was a good in-between. So, yeah. Cinnamon rolls. Thanks for watching, and yeah.